and develop things there. The moon is very close, 4 days away. Doesn't take much more time to get to the moon from Florida than it does to get to Antarctica from Las Vegas. And it's as big as a continent. It's as big as Africa. Lots to explore, no native populations and no native ecosystem. So this is where we will learn how to develop the resources of space. But doing the moon is much harder than anything we've done in space so far. So for example, here's the International Space Station. Humankind's most impressive peacetime technological achievement. At root, though, as impressive as it is, it's really just a couple of things. A way to get up into space and back, a way to get power in and heat out, which is most of what you see in this image of the International Space Station, and a tiny little cluster of modules, a warren of modules, which together have about as much volume inside as a 777. Now think about doing that same thing on the moon. We still need those same three things. You got to get up into space and back. You have to get power in and heat out. You have to have a place to live and work. You have to have the lunar versions of those things, which are different from the ones for space stations. And you need a big system to get to the moon and back from the Earth. You need a big system to get down to the surface and back up. And you need all that stuff to drive around, mobility, construction, playing in the dirt, learning how to extract valuable things from the resources we find there. That's all hard. Now, the space station took the combined efforts of 16 leading spacefaring nations 30 years. Getting that type of capability on the moon is not going to be fast or cheap. But it is where we will start to learn how to open the exploit future. Let's talk about the other bridge, which is the experience future. How would our world be different if 10,000 ordinary humans flew in space every year, experiencing what we call the overview effect? The drama of the flight, high acceleration, vibration, noise, the thrill of that flight, the incomparable experience of free fall, sustained free fall and microgravity, which cannot be replicated on Earth, and the unbelievable view out the window, the most poignant view in the solar system, which changes all the time due to lighting and clouds and so forth. That's a marketable experience, and we're at the cusp of being able to see how this market will grow. What will happen in our future when spaceflight becomes normalized through the experience future, as it also becomes an engine for growth of space activity? So, Blue Origin is committed to this future of millions of people living and working in space to benefit Earth, and one of our flagship programs is what we call Orbital Reef. We formed a partnership with Sierra Space, another privately funded aerospace prime company, and together with them and our teammates, including Boeing and Redwire, Amazon, AWS, and Arizona State University, we are building, not designing or conceiving, we are building today an end-to-end service capability for commercializing low Earth orbit. That includes the rocket, 2 different versions of transfer vehicles to ride on the rocket, and all the destination systems for a space station like you see in the image here. This will lower the bar for multiple industries to participate in space in a way that has never been able to happen before. So think of Orbital Reef as a mixed-use business park, taking full advantage of this incredible location just 400 kilometers above our head. It separates the tenant uses from the space vehicle operations, which decouples the business cases of the owner-operator from the business cases of the tenants. That lowers the bar for everybody, just like in mixed-use developments on Earth. Each core increment, you see 3 in this image here, adds capacity for 10 people. By broadening the market and lowering the bar, we will unleash whatever can be unleashed in commercial development of low Earth orbit. The system has a zoned architecture, even from the start. You don't sleep in the laboratory on Orbital Reef. You sleep in a dormitory, or a hotel, or a condo. Special purpose modules off to the sides are optimized for those users, those tenants, and their business cases. We're developing a new space architecture for Orbital Reef. This is not like living inside a VCR. This is living in space the way we always thought it should be. Incredible blue marble of Earth becomes the sky canopy, viewed through the largest windows ever flown in space. 16 sunrises and 16 sunsets every day. A main street with storefronts on the side. A familiar architectural type. Living spaces designed for living and entertainment and recreation. Tourist-safe excursions in little mini spacecraft rather than dangerous and difficult and bulky and painful spacesuits. And a proliferation of purpose-built modules to explore various business cases. We are pre-selling now. All of the systems you've seen in the last few minutes are in development, in prototype and proto-flight and some flight hardware already. All three vehicles will be flying within the next 2 years. So by the end of this decade, you could go to Orbital Reef and try your vision and your business and see. We'll be able to experiment with industrial applications, entertainment, gaming, sports, tourism, and all the things you can think of that might occur in a more robust ecosystem in space. So we're literally building the reef to build out the ecosystem. Nobody knows how fast the human spaceflight economy is going to grow in Earth orbit. But with Orbital Reef, we're going to find out. Thank you.
Please welcome physicist, author, and founding director of the Laurier Center for Women in Science, Sohini Ghosh.
Thank you. And I'm going to jump right in because I have so much to tell you. And I'm going to start by showing you this image of an ancient book from India. It's very famous, and I'm sure you've heard of it, but you're not going to be able to recognize it right away because I have encrypted the title by replacing every single letter in the title with a different letter. So I invite you to try to decrypt the title and figure out what this book is. It's a book from ancient India, very famous. Shout it out, don't be shy. Many of you have gone in a particular direction. And in fact, you would indeed be right if you guessed the Kama Sutra, so well done. So I'm sure you've heard of this book. Raise your hands if you have. If you haven't, it's a self-help manual. But in this book, actually, there's a chapter which describes how couples can secretly communicate with each other using exactly the encryption cipher I just described. So this may be the very first description of encryption in history, and that's why the Kama Sutra really should be famous. These days, we don't actually use this kind of a cipher because it's very easy to crack it. We have computers. We use much harder mathematical problems for encryption. For example, we look at factoring of large numbers. Here's a number for you to try to crack, but I don't recommend you trying this unless you have a supercomputer. So just to save time, I'm just going to give you the answer for this particular math problem. Here it is. I'm sure you would have guessed that. But the point here is that if you have a number that's maybe 260 digits or more, even supercomputers find it very hard to crack this. And that's useful because today's encryption methods that we use actually are based on the fact that this factoring problem is very difficult. So if you are sending some kind of an encrypted message and a hacker wants to actually steal your information, they would have to know how to solve factoring, and then they would be able to access your data. So that's pretty good because it's a pretty hard problem. But I worry. What if there's some whiz kid out there, you know, the one who knows all the digits of pi and, you know, can solve problems really fast and puzzles? What if she goes and figures out how to do factoring? Then we'll all be in big trouble. And even if the whiz kid doesn't do it, we actually already know that there exists a method to actually crack the factoring problem if we use entirely different computers, which I want to tell you more about today. And those are the computers of the future, which we call quantum computers. And these computers are wonderfully powerful, potentially cracking factoring as well as all kinds of other potential applications, because they are not just one more faster chip that we use even today. They are based on an entirely different framework of computing that harnesses the laws of quantum physics, which, as you may have heard, are very peculiar laws. For example, if you have a quantum particle such as an electron or a photon, which is a particle of light, if you want to know precisely every single property of that particle all at the same time, you just won't be able to do it. That's what we call quantum uncertainty. So, for example, if you want to precisely measure the position of the electron perfectly, you can do that. But then you wouldn't know anything about its direction or its speed of motion, its momentum. And if you want to know everything about its momentum, you wouldn't know about its position. Not because your devices are not good enough. It's because it's built into the theory itself. It is fundamentally unknowable, which is really weird, of course, and perhaps it tells us that maybe we can't do precision computing. But in fact, the really revolutionary idea is that for computing, embracing uncertainty can actually be a very powerful thing, so that it's actually a feature, not a bug. In the language of computing, as you all know, everything is based on a very simple framework, 0 and 1, binary digits, bits. But in the quantum computing world, we use the language of probabilities to embrace uncertainty. So there's some probability that a quantum bit, which is a qubit, is in the state 0, and some probability that it is a 1, and we don't know. And that's okay. That's what we call quantum superposition. Again, imprecision seems like a strange thing to use for computing. But really what we're doing is we're expanding the landscape of computing and going from just restricting ourselves to 2 points, 0 and 1, to an entire beautiful new boundary that we can explore. And it becomes even more interesting when we go to more than 1 qubit. When 2 or more qubits interact, they can get locked together in a kind of wonderful but peculiar handshake, so that individually each of these quantum particles can still be uncertain and fluid in a superposition of 0 and 1, but jointly the 2 qubits are perfectly in sync, so that when one of the qubits is measured to be a 0, the other one will instantly be a 1, no matter where they are in the universe. So this magical balance of certainty and uncertainty is what we call quantum entanglement. And it doesn't exist in our everyday computers today. But it's now an extra knob in that expanded quantum computing framework that we can use to build better, more powerful algorithms. So playing in this beautiful landscape of probabilities, the trick is to try to figure out how to travel the probability world in such a way that we can make the probability of the right answer for whatever task you're doing, make that grow, and the probability of the wrong answer to decrease. And in fact, it is indeed possible in this larger framework of computing. And this is something that eventually led scientists to realize that in this framework, we can actually build algorithms that can do that factoring problem. So now we'd all be in trouble, because in the future, if such a computer is built, all of our encryption is going to be completely vulnerable. However, quantum also offers us a way out.